Hi friends, I'm Bryn, and this is Friends Who Crime. Friends Who Crime. Before we dive into today's story, a quick reminder, as always, follow us on Instagram at Friends Who Crime and leave us a 5-star rating if you're enjoying the show. It really helps us keep digging into these spooky tales, and by us, I mean me. And slide into our DMs or comments if you've got a case you want us to cover. I always love hearing from you guys. Instead of a Brinterruption today, I wanted to update you guys on the plan for this podcast. The last few weeks, you guys have probably noticed I've been having a rough time with it, but I think I've figured it out. It is all a learning process. I've been doing this for over 6 months now, which is awesome, but I'm still learning. So here is the plan. I will be batch recording like 3 or 4 episodes at a time. 3 weeks out of the month, normal. Friends Who Crime, different guest, what you all know and love, what makes this podcast different. And then once a month, I'll do a shorter solo episode, either on another true crime case or maybe something spooky or morbid or something interesting. If you have ideas, please send them my way. Our email is friendswhocrime@gmail.com, or you can message me on Instagram at friendswhocrime. I think this plan is going to keep me more sane and more consistent for you guys. Let me know your thoughts. Do you like this? Are you feeling disappointed? Good or bad? Let me know. Also, if you have any, stories that you want me to tell on an episode, like one of those shorter episodes, I would love to hear them. If you have some ghost stories or something with cryptids or something where, you were in a dangerous situation or someone that committed a crime, I don't know, any of that, just send it my way. I would love, love, love to read it. Today we're talking about the case of Bob Peterson and Jean Thurnau. I'm going to skip the subtly intriguing intro that I usually do, and I'm just going to dive right in. Jean Thurnau was a U.S. Air Force veteran whose service and a desire to start fresh led him to relocate from Houston, Texas to St. Petersburg, Florida by 2006. He had actually just gotten divorced and wanted to be closer to his family there, just start over, clean slate. Once in Florida, he secured a position as an air traffic controller at the local airport and met his future wife, JJ. Jean was described as outgoing, friendly, gregarious. Jean had a promising and happy new chapter unfolding. He had a stable career, he had a loving marriage, and a brand new dream home in Land O'Lakes, Florida, where he and JJ were planning their future together. By all accounts, their marriage was typical, good even. But that all changed when a man named Bob followed them to Florida. Bob Peterson was a coworker of Jean's. He was also an air traffic controller in Texas when they lived there, and he transferred to St. Petersburg shortly after Jean moved there. Bob had a brother named Anthony who was already living in Florida, so it seemed like that's why he chose to relocate. Bob and Jean were acquaintances, maybe even friends in some people's eyes. Bob was generally well liked at work, but he was holding back a big part of himself. Bob was gay, and the only one who knew was his brother. Of course, this must have been a huge weight on Bob's shoulders, feeling like he couldn't tell anyone who he really was. He couldn't be himself. It seems like he may have moved to Florida because his brother was the only one who knew about his sexuality and accepted him for it. But this is where things get a little strange. After meeting JJ, Jean decided to sell his house and move into a new place with her in another area of the city. When Jean's house went on the market, Bob bought the house furnished with all of Jean's old furniture. In fact, Bob was deeply upset when the old used linens weren't included in the sale. He also bought the same truck that Jean had, got a dog of the same breed as Jean's dachshund, and even mailed photos of the old house to Jean unprompted. Big yikes. Big yikes. Fast forward to November 2006. Jean and JJ were all moved into their new place, and Bob insisted on having dinner with them. They hesitated at first. It takes a while to settle into a new house. Things are messy. There are boxes that maybe haven't been fully unpacked. But Bob insisted. Bob talked them into it, and they accepted. On the evening of November 1st, 2006, Jean and JJ welcomed Bob into their brand new house, which had been adorned with a Christmas tree and other holiday decorations. Bob showed up with a housewarming gift, an expensive photo album of their new home being built. A photo album of their house being built. Which means he was taking pictures throughout the process of this new home being built. If you're creeped out like I am, that is valid and correct, because JJ was also creeped out. And honestly, who wouldn't be? It's not exactly the best way to say, like, I'm a great friend, I'm your number one fan. It's more, I'm your full-time stalker and I'm creepy. During dinner, Bob barely touched his food and sat nervously on the couch. It was awkward. Conversation lulled, and Bob wasn't being a great conversationalist. We've all experienced this, I think. It's not that you don't enjoy being around the person necessarily, but the lack of conversation is uncomfortable. They're not giving you anything to go off of, even if you're really trying, and all you want to do is get the hell out of there. After about an hour, JJ told Jean she had to run a quick errand with their daughter, hoping Bob would finally leave. Jean stayed behind with Bob. When JJ returned from her errand, things didn't feel quite right. The first thing she noticed was that Bob's truck was gone. Good. The awkwardness was gone with it. But then she noticed some dark splatters on the porch steps and into the hallway of the home. Once inside the house, she saw a gruesome scene. Jean's bloody t-shirt and jeans were lying in a heap under the Christmas tree. Both men were nowhere to be found. Terrified, JJ dialed 911. Inside, she also found a single spent .22 caliber bullet casing next to the couch. Then her eyes landed on something even worse. A 3-page letter folded on the back of the couch. She picked it up, realizing it was Bob's handwriting, addressed to Jean. Then JJ started to read. The letter began innocently. It said, "I have loved you for some time now. I've always chickened out when I tried to tell you." Sounds, it's weird, but it's not creepy. It's not dangerous. It's, like I said, kind of innocent. This is where, though, it gets pretty gross and creepy and, even more gross and creepy. Bob wrote things like, and I quote, "I have had sex with 25 men in my life, but I have never loved another man until I met you. I want to have sex with you. I am not leaving until I taste your manhood in my mouth." Yup. He wrote that. And I'm squirming saying it. If you're squirming hearing it, imagine how JJ felt. All I can say is, Bob, you need therapy, my friend. Go to therapy. There's something wrong. Investigators later pieced together what likely happened. This may not be exactly how it went down, but it's the best guess from the investigators' standpoint. They believe Bob handed Jean the letter right after JJ left. Jean read it, freaked out, and told Bob to leave, as one would. Bob reacted without hesitation. He pulled out a pistol and shot Jean in the head. Once Jean collapsed onto the floor, Bob dragged his body to his truck, which explains the blood on the porch, and drove away with him. When police arrived at the scene, they concluded there was a chance that Jean was still alive. If Jean was still alive at that point, every second mattered. They began searching for the two men as quick as they could, which, good on them. Good police work. 2 days later, on November 3rd, detectives tracked Bob down to a rented house in Safety Harbor. They knocked several times with no answer, so they forced their way inside. It didn't take long for them to process the scene that they walked into. On the bed lay Bob Peterson, shot through the face. On the floor beside him was Jean Thurnau, shot in the head with the same gun. And worst of all, and this is gnarly, so trigger warning, Jean's genitals had been severed by a straight razor.
That was a lot, all at once, that was a lot. This is a song, so you can take your time. Take a deep breath, now we'll get back to crime.
The dismemberment of Jean's genitals is obviously shocking, but it may have been Bob's attempt to, destroy what he desired and couldn't possess. In cases of intimate betrayal like this, extreme body mutilation is sometimes interpreted psychologically as an outlet for rage or feelings of emasculation or violence toward what is being spiritually rejected, kind of making up for that lack of connection or, having feelings not being returned. Investigators immediately ruled the scene a murder-suicide. Newspapers reported Bob had been, quote, living a lie, and had already asked God for forgiveness. As JJ painfully told a reporter, quote, I don't hate Bob. How can you hate someone who is mentally disturbed? And JJ, girl, you are stronger than I. She had every reason to hate Bob. I would hate Bob. But she said she obviously had no idea Bob was in love with her husband, and to her, he was always just an odd coworker. One of my questions here is why? If Bob was in love with Jean, why did he kill him? Research shows murder-suicide perpetrators frequently experience intense depression, emotional turmoil, and a sense of hopelessness in relationships. Unlike typical homicide suspects, murder-suicide offenders are often highly depressed. They're often male, and their destructive actions potentially are driven by a lot of internal conflict and the belief that ending their own life is the only escape from their pain, and they're going to take somebody with them. Essentially, he may have believed that there was no life ahead without Jean. Bob's note reveals a lot of cognitive dissonance. He admitted uncertainty about his sexuality while declaring his deep, unrequited love for Jean. It seemed from the letter like he wasn't sure if he was gay. He was dealing with obsession, for sure, identity confusion, rejection, shame, and that can push someone towards self-destruction, especially when the object of their affection doesn't reciprocate. All that being said, people admit their love for a friend all the time. People get rejected by their love interest all the time. But that doesn't lead to murder in 99.9999999% of cases. I've been there. I assume if you're listening, you may probably have been there as well. And I know murder has never crossed my mind, which is good. Jean had come looking for a fresh start and found family and love. Bob had come looking for new beginnings too, but sadly this ended in a nightmare, not just for himself, but for an innocent family. The police closed the case, concluding Bob had killed Jean before turning the gun on himself. No evidence pointed to anyone else. It was pretty clear what happened. It was an easy case to close, and it sounds like JJ found closure herself. Unfortunately, this is another case of distorted reality ending in murder. It's also a case of Bob being, like he needed help. He had a mental illness, and he didn't get the help that he needed. To his friends and family, Jean wasn't just the victim of a crime. He was a warm, funny, and generous man who made people feel cared for. He and JJ built a life together in Florida, filling their home with love and laughter. JJ has actually spoken quite a bit about Jean and his way of making ordinary days feel special, whether it was through his quick humor, his kindness, or simply the way he showed up for the people he cared about. Losing Jean was devastating for everyone who knew him, and JJ has carried that grief with incredible strength. But when people talk about Jean, they remember more than what happened to him, and we should too. They remember his loyalty, his love for his family, and the light that he brought into everyone's lives. So while this story ends in tragedy, Jean's life is not defined by that violence. His story is one of love, connection, and the impact he had on the people who still cherish his memory now. As JJ herself once said about Jean, he wasn't perfect, but he was perfect for me. He made my world brighter, and I'll love him forever. And that is the case of the murder of Jean Thurnau. Pretty dark, not gonna lie. I love the quote that I ended with here from JJ. He wasn't perfect, but he was perfect for me. I love that sentiment. There's actually a song from my favorite band ever. They're called The Cab. And in one of their songs, they say that line, "I'm not perfect, but I swear I'm perfect for you." And it just, I don't know, something about it is comforting. You don't have to be perfect to be loved by someone unconditionally. You can still make someone's world brighter, and someone will love you forever, even though you have flaws. Everyone has flaws. So I will leave you with that today. I know I'll be thinking about it this evening, and I hope that you do too. Just take a moment for Jean. And I will catch you next week. Like I said, I've got a plan moving forward. I'm really excited about it. Let me know what you think about it. I really do need your feedback at this point. And until then, remember, friends don't let friends commit crimes.